you ready? Okay, people, clearly I have been souped up on coffee. I have been up for 24 hours at the time of this recording. And this is my good friend Veronica, and she is going to help bring me down. She'll help bring me down a little bit. Welcome to another episode of My Decade in Review as part of the Creative Alchemy series. I'm really excited to talk with Veronica Shanklin. I will call her V throughout this recording because that is her nickname, much like you guys know me as Ray. I had the pleasure and honor of meeting Veronica. It's been 12 years now. And so before I get into our backstory, I would love for her to give her the floor for her to introduce herself and tell you who she is.
Okay. Like she said, my name is Veronica Shanklin. I am the founder of a nonprofit called Dementia Care Warriors, which is a 501c3, and our mission is to provide support and resources to caregivers caring for a loved one with Alzheimer's. And so how I kind of got into that is that I am a caregiver for my mom. I was a caregiver for my mom and my grandmother for the last around 7 or 8 years. And so over that time, I've become a passionate advocate for caregivers. I have been very involved in the Alzheimer's community locally and nationally, and it led me to start this organization where I help caregivers. So that's kind of the short of it.
I love it. And we're going to definitely dive more into that from a personal standpoint because I know Veronica not just as a colleague, but truly as a friend. And so I've kind of watched her life transition from being, in corporate America, working full time to making some major sacrifices in her life to be a full time caregiver and then to go on to create this organization. But as you know, we are here for Creative Flow Alchemy, which means that we want to know more about Veronica's backstory and we want to know more about specifically with this decade in review, our convergence. How did Veronica and I come together? What is that creative energy or spirit that connects us? And I think you'll find that there's a lot of fun, a lot of fun to unpack with our backstory. So, I love to see what comes up. What's the first thing that comes up when you think about us, B? Like, very first thing.
You already know food.
Of course.
like, like
Food. Yeah.
if you are with us, you will eat well. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
My earliest memories, and I think my very first memory of you included coming to your home, and Veronica used to throw these really awesome kickbacks at her condo downtown Chicago, and we just ate really good all the time and had really good music, and it was always what I would consider a mixture of just upscale but not too bougie black elite, elite crowd you would have. And I was the baby there, so let's be clear, I was fresh in Chicago when I met Veronica, and how I know her is through my cousin, and they went to grad school together. They went to Columbia. So technically we are all creatives. We all did go to an art school, different backgrounds, and I'll let her share hers, but it was my cousin that connected me to Veronica. And then my very, again, first interaction was with their group of friends and me just kind of getting in where I fit in, which included a plate, a cup, and some really good music. So yeah, what's your background educationally, creatively? Tell me a little bit about that.
Okay. So I actually am originally from Dallas, Texas. I graduated from the University of Texas at Austin, go Longhorns, with a business degree in marketing. So immediately, or maybe like a year after graduation, I moved to Chicago. And in Chicago, I worked in marketing. I worked at Burrell Advertising Agency, which is a Black-owned, one of the largest advertising agencies, and worked on accounts like Verizon, McDonald's, Abbott Laboratories. So I did engagement marketing, PR, events for those brands. And from there, I left and went into more of the nonprofit sector via education. And so I left there and went to the community college system in Chicago and worked at one of the colleges as a director of marketing. And then from there, went and worked at their district office. And basically I was in Chicago for 10 years. Like those were, I feel like my formative years and years that kind of made me into the person that I am today. And it was a lot of fun times, a lot of great times. Like I miss those days. So then after 10 years in Chicago, I was coming back and forth to Dallas visiting my mom. My mom was taking care of my grandmother who had Alzheimer's, and I realized that my mom was struggling taking care of my grandmother. And so at some point, I felt like I should step in and help. And so after a series of incidents, I ended up moving back to Dallas. And it was kind of over that same time that I know you ended up leaving your job. I ended up leaving my job. We were kind of in a similar, like, parallel place. And that's where, before I moved back, I started, or right when I moved back, I kind of think, I started my blog, which was Be Myself and I. You want me to keep going, or you want to kind of?
Yeah, you know, I want to let's pause a little bit because you said something that was really great, and I want to, before you go on to talk about the blog, you said those are your formative years. So you moved to Chicago when you were how old?
23, 24.
Yeah, so like early 20s, and then you pretty much spent up until about 33, 34 in Chicago. So, you know, a big part of the Creative Flow Alchemy audience and, you know, our work is to work with millennials. And so millennials today, pretty much like myself, we fall right in that 20 uh mid to late 20s and then early 30 range. So a lot of what you're talking about, especially the transition starting in marketing, then coming forward and actually exercising that in both corporate America, but also moving into nonprofit sector, and then me knowing what you do today for your business and then things that we do together, it really is cool to see that, you know, your formal training and your formal education, you were able to use every step of the way. So it doesn't, you know, I'm a big proponent of education, but not necessarily traditional education. But I'm happy to hear that at a time where you were stepping out, moving into a new city, starting an entirely new life, you were able to use that. And so if you are someone who has a traditional education, please don't get it twisted. That does not mean that you can't also be an entrepreneur and also be a creative and think and work outside of the box. So you're a great example of that. But definitely continue. Tell us more about like Be Myself and I, the blog, and what that, you know, kind of became.
Absolutely. And then to your point, it's really a foundation. Like, all of the experiences that we have in life, all of those experiences I had in my 20s, all the people that I met, the relationships, the networking, all of that, I'm still friends with people from, you know, that I can call up today that I met during those years. So I think that, you know, those are not to be taken lightly. Those years of our lives are the years that we are building this foundation. So just wanted to add that. So I think I left off at Be Myself and I, which was, so when I started this caregiving journey, I am a researcher. I will go online and I'm going to figure out whatever it is that I need to figure out. So in my researching and looking at information online about Alzheimer's, about caregiving, dementia, etc., everything was so sad and so depressing and so dark. And I was like, I'm going to create a space online for caregivers that's going to be happy, and I'm going to be the light, and I'm going to shine some light on this. And mind you, this is literally my first year or so going into this situation or into this role. And so I'm like, I'm going to be light and, you know, yada, yada, yada. And then here we are 7 or 8 years later. And I'm like, oh, now I understand why everything was so dark, why everything was so depressing, because this is a very challenging role and a very difficult place to be. So, but Be Myself and I did try to make a space online that offered resources and tools and tips for caregivers, kind of from a more lighthearted standpoint.
Yeah. And guys, so it was 2012, the year that we kind of went through this initial phase of transitioning from the work that we were doing. So I was also in marketing, but from a direct sales background. So when I moved to Chicago, you guys probably already have heard so much of my story, but when I moved to Chicago, went to Columbia for a year, and then I actually had to leave, went to city colleges to continue my education for a while also working a bunch of jobs just to make sure I could, you know, afford to stay in Chicago. And as part of that, found my way from, you know, retail to sales to marketing. And, you know, there's burnout. There's just a level of burnout that kicked in 2012 for me that, you know, I was making money and I was feeling very much so accomplished in the work, especially being 22. Like, I mean, 22 making the money I was making and feeling like the trajectory for my career was definitely moving forward and fast. But something in me just felt like if I didn't stop and slow down and get really clear, I would become a workhorse and I wouldn't have an identity in the midst of all the work I was doing. And so, you know, at that time, Veronica and I had been friends for several years, and we just started sharing a lot of the frustrations and the challenges around knowing when it's time to go, but not necessarily having the courage around it. And we challenge each other. It's really funny. We, you know, she left for her reasons, I left for mine, but we were kind of in this place of what's next. So yes, of course, she was making that transition back to Dallas, and I was still, continuing my education. But when it came to work, I was taking like weird temp jobs and things like that, but I just felt unfulfilled.
Mhm.
Sure enough, we got to talking and we challenged each other to start a blog. She had already had an idea in her mind, which was Be Myself and I. And I knew that I wanted to get or connect my creative work, being an art management student, to the work that I was going to create. And so that's how my first blog, Everyday Summary, was born. So we launched at the same time. Pretty much we were on the phone for hours figuring out. I remember telling her, like, V, I know this is crazy. I know zero about blogging. I know absolutely nothing, but I'm going to get a Grammy Award winning artist for my first blog. And we don't know who that's going to be. And I don't know. I only got 4 or 5 weeks to make it happen, but I'll make it happen. And sure enough, I did. And, looking back at just what we were able to do in such a small amount of time, coming off of a place of security and stability, stepping away from that, taking a risk. And I mean, without going too much into the details, V had a tiny bit more cushion than I did at 22, if you understand what I'm saying. So I've been walking on the edge for a long time as an as an entrepreneur. But the point is, the creative spirit led our decision making. But at the same time, we both had to find our balance. So V, tell me, what happened next in your career? Like where, what happened once you got back to Dallas and settled into caregiving?
Okay, so I came back to Dallas. I was coming from a 9 to 5 career type situation, and now I'm not working at all. So I'm like, I need to find something to do. One of the things I did was I went and volunteered at the Alzheimer's Association. And that was a really smart thing to do because I was able to get access to resources that I might not have ever known exist. I was able to start building those relationships in that community, and basically start building again on that foundation that led me to where I am now. I also use my marketing skills to do, some freelancing, some graphic design, some, web design and that sort of stuff. But I didn't aggressively pursue that as much as I could have
Mhm.
because I was also caregiving. So now I'm balancing kind of getting into the Alzheimer's community as an advocate, also caregiving, and also trying to bring in a couple dollars on the side so I can, move how I want to move. So that's where that went. At some point over those years, caregiving got really, really dark. As my grandmother progressed and got sicker, it got really dark. And eventually I kind of stepped away from Be Myself and I. And I mean, it was still out there. Every once in a while I would post something, but blogging, as you know, and as many people know, is a very involved
Mhm.
activity.
Yeah.
So I stepped away from that. And then my grandmother passed in 2017. And so, long story short, fast forward to 2019, I ended up partnering with the Alzheimer's Association, the local chapter, to do an event called Hope for Tomorrow,
Mhm.
which was a caregivers workshop for African American caregivers. Um, and I did it under Dementia Care Warriors, which
Nice.
is a nonprofit that I officially got my 501c3 that December, but I was kind of already doing the work.
Mhm.
And I felt like as I had been on this journey for so long and had, seen what was available to caregivers, I kind of felt like there was a little something missing. I was attending support groups, I had facilitated support groups, and there weren't really many people that looked like me. And therefore, they were great people. I learned a lot, don't get me wrong, but we really weren't facing necessarily the exact same situations. You had a lot of older people who were taking care of, so like my mom's generation taking care of their parents, and then generations taking care of their spouses.
Mhm.
But there weren't really like 30 something caregivers in these groups. And I'm like, I know we're out here because I come across them from time to time. And I wanted to provide a space back to my light, fun, up, upbeat type of space for those caregivers. And so I started support group happy hours. And
Nice.
so we would meet at a Mexican restaurant. So it was some ladies in my same demographic, caring for their moms, dealing with the same issues. And so we would meet at a Mexican restaurant for margaritas because, there's always food involved if I'm there. And just kind of lean on each other, vent, laugh, talk, discuss, all of those things in a more laid back environment. And so that's what I wanted to provide. And so I continue to build upon that. again, that was late 2019, and that brings us into 2020, where the world turned upside down. So I my next activity that I was going to start was a Saturday night outing for caregivers and their loved ones. Because again, our parents are in a space where they still want to get out, they still want to, kind of have a social life, and there's not many places that you can take your loved one with Alzheimer's that
Yeah.
understand, the situation. So the first activity I did with that was a Saturday night out paint and sip. So I invited, I think maybe like about six or seven caregivers and their moms to my house. And I actually got a professional to come in and bring all the equipment and the tools. And we sat and we painted these lovely pictures. No one else had ever done it. I've done a couple painting steps before, but no one else had ever done it. And it was like, we had such a good time. And I'm like, I'm definitely on to something here. And so that was February. In March, I had reserved a karaoke room, like a private karaoke room. And the plan was to do karaoke, but then COVID came. Also in March, I had planned a brunch for caregivers called Revive Refresh, which was kind of a space to love on caregivers, because I feel like a lot of times caregivers are forgotten. So I had speakers, I had massage therapists going to do chair massages, a really nice catered brunch. But back to this thing called COVID. Ended up not being able to do that in person, did it virtually, and it turned out really good virtually. It wasn't what I expect or hoped it to be, but it turned out okay. So all of that to say, all of these years leading up to this have led me to this point with my nonprofit where I am able to help and provide the support to caregivers that I know they need.
Yeah, and the truth is, everything you name that you do in your organization are the same skills and resources that you got from your marketing background: event planning, event coordination, fundraising, sponsorships, everything that you do. So, guys, one of the things that connects me to Veronica also and really helps me empathize in this way. I don't have a mother or grandmother personally who is currently experiencing Alzheimer's dementia, but my aunt, and back to how we met, my cousin's mother, and she has Alzheimer's, dementia, Alzheimer's. And what I will say is this: until you have been a caregiver, until you have been in that role, it's very hard to understand um, the amount of attention and sacrifice that is required to be in that role. So I watched my friend have her complete freedom to then being completely in service and of service to her mother and her grandmother. And so it was a really stark like change watching her go from Chicago coming back to Texas. I'm now in Dallas. We live in the same city for the second time, and it's just a very different place in our life. I think, I see Visa cancer. So let's just put this out here. She's a natural caregiver. Like, it is in her blood and her spirit to just give and pour into people. But I've just learned so much. And I also sometimes struggle watching it, because when I was caregiving, which was a small season compared to anything that she might be experiencing, I was doing it alone and it was hard. And I didn't necessarily have the knowledge, the skills, definitely didn't have the community to ask these questions. And I felt a lot of shame around caregiving without knowing what I was doing, or making just the feeling of making my loved one feel less than. I was always feeling very, concerned and shameful around making her feel less than. So there's all these complexities that come up emotionally. And while this conversation isn't specifically around, Alzheimer's, dementia, and caregiving, what I will say is, as a creator, as a creative, I think that caregiving taught me how to care for myself. Like, caregiving for someone else taught me all of the ways that I dropped the ball in loving myself. And there were some really challenging moments caring for my aunt that made me realize also that I take for granted. I really took for granted those moments of fun, those lighthearted moments, those memories that, like, while she can't tap into, is so important for me to. And as a creative, I started memorializing those things. So one of the first things I did when I knew I was going to leave Chicago, and like, I'm so grateful for it, is I took a photo on the top of the building that my aunt lived in for over 15 years, and went to the rooftop, sat on that corner ledge, and had a photographer photograph me there. It was crazy. I could have died, plummeted to my death, definitely, Windy City, Chicago. But having a memory like that is something that I can never get back. It's priceless because right after that, we lost the condo and life changed drastically for us. And so, it's this crux of gratitude and appreciation, but also, grief and remorse, and always trying to find your balance. And I think millennial creatives understand that we are in this weird position of caregiving, not just in this formal setting, but like we are right between our Gen Zers who are like pretty much running the world right now, and then our parents who are a little bit more traditional. I would say we're right in the middle, trying to serve both, trying to maintain an identity in between, taking advantage of the traditional ways of living, but also taking advantage of all this non traditional digital technological age work, and trying to find our way all the time. So I think that you being a creative and being a caregiver, like you just probably have so much awareness, so much more awareness, even though you're not technically a millennial. I know that you just have your eyes in spaces that a lot of people have never even considered. So, what would you say when you think about ways that you have personally grown, just you as a creator, you as a caregiver, but more importantly, you as a woman? Like what has changed for you, and what are some of the things that you think might be important for people to consider as millennial creatives because of this work?
I think one of the things that caregiving, just this entire experience, has taught me is to enjoy the moment.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
you take a lot of things for granted. You take a
Yeah.
lot of your experiences for granted, and
Hmm.
I am so like more aware of enjoying the moment. I'm so more aware of making moments and making memories and doing like I will jump through hoops to make sure that I can do something that I want to do. I mean, that's also a form of self-care. But as a caregiver, you get locked down, like, and a lot of times you are on lockdown, like you
Yeah.
can't leave, you can't, if you don't have any help,
Yeah.
and those sorts of things. And you have to be very intentional about making those moments and enjoying those moments. So that is definitely one thing I would say. And then the other thing is patience is another lesson learned over these years,
Mhm.
from as a caregiver, professionally, patience with yourself, I think, and also having grace with
Yeah.
yourself, grace with others, and like just understanding where other people are coming from and putting yourself in those shoes and understanding that people are going through mess and
Yeah.
like you're going through mess, other people are going through mess. Take that in consideration when you deal with them on
Yeah.
professionally, relationships, friendships, on so many levels. So I would say those are like a few things that I feel like.
I really feel that. I really feel, especially on relationships, because like you mentioned in the beginning, those formative years, those 20s, when you are creating these relationships, it's so important to nurture them. It's so important to take care of them. I mean, I have at least, I would say the majority of my friends are 8 to 10 years my senior.
Mhm.
And I look at that and I say, it's because of that. It's because I was kind of thrust into this world of older friends that I learned how to quickly have quality relationships, because it's just a different setting. It's a different tone. There, you got, being a little bit more advanced, you've done the work around relationship building. So I'm kind of coming in and learning firsthand or secondhand through the work you've done. And I would say being nurturing, but being patient, like you said, being patient with yourself. I, again, watched you go through all these transitions and had all these feelings around it, but didn't necessarily know, like, okay, this is this amazingly like creative, powerful, definitely focused and driven woman, but she's choosing a different life, not necessarily because she had to do it this way, but because that's the way that it felt most authentic and like the best way to love and serve her family. But at the same time, Veronica is still like, I mean, a creator. Like, she is still a full-time, I would say, creator. Even in the midst of caregiving, she's always got her hands in something. And so, not only am I proud to be a part of her mission and supporting her vision for Dementia Care Warriors, but we also have a project, or what did I call it? Small batch marketing firm, branding firm, that we, after 12 years of knowing each other, working in a similar space, we've come together to create once I moved here to Dallas. And we've done a lot of little projects together, but this was, I would say, our first time merging our careers in any way. And so, you want to tell me a little bit about it?
So the small batch branding agency. So um, we both have similar skill sets. And so we decided to bring those skill sets together. We have an agency called Whoa Creative. And so over what, maybe since like February, like right as the quarantine was starting, bring this together. So Rachel brings her super duper project management and like strategy skills, and I bring my creative web design, graphic design skills, and we have merged them together to come up with this agency where we have been able to help clients. And I think one of the other things about our agency is that we want to build brands that bring impact. And so we work with clients who are who share the same vision that we do to be able to make an impact on the world. Be it a speaker, an author, even and other creatives, photographers, and just people who have the same vision as us to make an impact. And so we were able to bring that together and come with Whoa Creative, and we are excited about 2021, and
Yes, we are.
we will go from here because, I mean, truth be told, this is a like a well-kept secret.
It's a well-kept secret. Neither one of us have marketed. Neither one of us have in any way put up promotional content. We have not done any selling at all. So that just goes right back to the quality of relationships that bring, again, work to our door. Like we've been working technically since February when we formed the actual brand name. And since then we've served 3 long-term clients, meaning quarterly clients. And so that means we had at least a client per quarter. And we're closing out the year really strong and looking forward to what's going to happen in 2021. But there's no self promotion. There's no like shameless plugging for this brand, because the truth is neither one of us are working it because we need to, which makes it even better. Like we genuinely enjoy the work. And I would say if there was anything that I want you guys to take from this conversation, thinking about this decade in review and just like what I've learned being connected to Veronica and how she's contributed to my life, is that patience factor. We've known each other for so long. We've had many opportunities to come together and work. Dallas was not on my radar 10 years ago. Dallas was not on my radar 5 years ago. It happened when it was supposed to happen. Here I am. And even though COVID definitely changed our life, it did not stop us from coming together. It did not stop like what I would say God's divine plan. It didn't stop it at all. And even though we have been in isolation and locked down in our homes, we were still working with people, making impact. And right before we shut down, we had the opportunity to launch what we call our one-day personal branding blitz. And so we did an on-site one-day branding event. And I mean, everything you can think of happening on-site with our client, Myra Rollins. And guys, amazing. Like just the energy that we felt, we had never done before. We took a risk. We jumped in head first, and I'm so grateful we did. And I would say just trust the timing of your life.
Right.
Like trust it. Trust that the seeds you planted and the relationships you built 10, 12 years ago are going to still be fruitful for you and you to it. Like if you nurture it and put the love in, but also like take your hands off the wheel and trust spirit to guide you, it will come back when it's supposed to.
And I know this is as cliche can be, but what is meant to be will be. It's like that is the story of my life. So in July, I was in an issue of O Magazine.
Yes.
Mind you, I did that interview, I want to say in 2017.
Wow.
I did. It was, over the phone with the reporter and share my story and, everything or whatever. And the article never printed.
And that was at the beginning of your DCW like formation.
Right. Yeah. So I did this interview 2 years ago. Never published, never, heard back from the lady. And we had a good conversation and everything, but it just never went through. And I was like, oh, well, I mean, and I hadn't even told anybody about it. I was just like, yeah, I talked to O Magazine, whatever.
Right.
But long story short, the lady reached back out to me earlier this year and was like, hey, I think we're ready to publish that article. Do you have any updates? I want to talk to you, ask you a couple more questions, get a little more clarity. And the article published in July 2020. And so
3 years later.
It happens when it's supposed to happen, and not to stress yourself out over things that don't go through because it's not meant to be in that moment. And so
Yeah,
just, okay with that and move on to the next thing, because what's for you is for you.
I love that. I love that. So, the in your career, in your creative flow journey, thinking as far back from childhood till now, are there any books, shows, speakers, influencers, anyone that just like pops in your head that you would say, yeah, this definitely was a part of my journey that I think, if I could offer to some creative out there, they should check this out?
Wow, that is an excellent question. And I will admit you kind of caught me off guard with
Good,
that.
good. I love it. I love a little
Oh
organic
my gosh.
flow. Take a moment to think about it. I'll share, kind of why I asked that question and
Okay.
give you a chance to think. It's my goal through Creative Flow Alchemy to continue to show the divine synchronicities of our journeys, no matter what age we are, no matter where we live, and no matter our background, that there are some like points of conversion on this like web that connects us. And so for us, is although we joke about food and we talk about food and coming together, I've been saying lately I'm a socialite and I just want to be flued out to wherever I need to be. Flued. Flew out to speak and probably throw a nice supper club event and
Right,
then go home. You know what I'm saying? TED Talks and supper clubs. That's what I see for my life. And
right.
so when I think about that, there were some things that were really pivotal, in our convergence, but it really people centered, I would say, for us, people and relationship centered. But I really want you to think about yours. So, think again, childhood, maybe in college, was there a book? Was there a show? Is there working at Burrell? Maybe there was like something around media. I'm just, I'm really curious.
I am too. No, I was kidding. I'm curious too as to what that would have been in my life as I try to think back on what that I would say that was. And the thing is, like, just from a book standpoint, I'm just kind of like going through my bookcase, like
Yeah.
I'm like
What
visually.
about albums? Like it doesn't have to be a book, like music. We're on Clubhouse and me and V joined around the same time and I did a night called goodness, what was it called? 90s Lessons Over Lyrics 90s edition. And so we got on and had a nice little group of people talking about their favorite music from the 90s. And so I'm just curious, it could be music, it doesn't have to be a
I
book.
can't. I honestly cannot. I can't pinpoint that. I wish you would have given me a heads up.
No, that's okay. Listen,
But
you're fine. If you think of something, I'll put it in the comments for people.
but I will say traveling,
There you go.
getting out of your comfort zone, getting out of your home. I mean,
Mhm.
I moved away from Dallas for 10 years and I would be a different person if I didn't do that. But even just road trips, I know it's hard to travel now, but road trips and just seeing a different part of the country, seeing a different part of the state, the world, even, I think is life changing,
Absolutely. That's a
like,
huge part. Veronica's don't get it twisted. Now, prior to her being a full-time caregiver, this woman was somewhere every couple months, like always gone. So to your point, I do think that if you have the chance to travel, if there's anything that's keeping you back other than the obvious, which, at this time for us is COVID, but even in that, see if you can carve out ways to make moves because being out of the country, being out of your comfort zone does open you up to a world of possibility, new people, new experiences, and you challenge yourself in a way that you just don't know what you're capable of until you're in a situation that is not familiar. And it can be done safely and it can
mhm,
be done really inexpensive. And like people think that travel costs so much money, but we are the queens of a
mhm,
good trip
absolutely.
on a tight budget.
Absolutely. Like, I mean, and people, have this false sense that I am over here balling because I'm traveling, and you really can like make the most out of, very little. Like it's possible. It's just about being intentional.
Yeah.
As I said before, like life is about intention. You can sit back on your sofa and watch TV for the next 20 years. You know what I mean? Like, and then and also feel sorry for yourself
Yeah.
because you're sitting back on your sofa. But it's up to you to have that intention and to make those things happen that you want to make happen. And like it brings so much joy to me to be able to get out and see it's landscapes, it's people, it's just a different environment can just do so much for your mental.
Yeah. Do it for your internal culture. We do a whole bunch for the external culture.
Right,
Do it for your internal culture scape.
right.
I love that. And honestly, I think on that note, what I'll say is this, y'all, listen, there are a ton of ways in which you can, I mean, this conversation, there's so many things you can pull from it, but there are a few things that I just really want to have you take from this. One, trust yourself and the intentionality around the decisions that you make. She kept saying intention, and everything that we do is about being intentional, deliberate creators of our life. So if you can remember that, make decisions towards that, it's going to get you where you want to go. Two, remember to be patient with yourself. Remember to give yourself room to grow. So where Veronica was at 20, 23, it's still serving her now in her life. And so that just means that just because you don't see it immediately does not mean that it's not coming to fruition. Creative Flow Alchemy has been a 12 plus year journey for me. I mean, it started again in my childhood, but my entire career has got me to this point where I can now have these conversations and serve you guys in a way that I definitely didn't see for myself all those years ago. And then the last thing I would say is whatever you need to do to get out of your comfort zone to experience your edge. If you can get right on the edge, whether that be through travel, whether that be through new relationships, whether that be through a new job and doing something totally different than what you're used to, if that's safe for you, what's on the other side of it? Jump in and see what it feels like. You have zero commitment to anything that you have to make long term in this life. Life is meant to be lived, life is meant to be explored, it's meant to be discovered and not meant to be stagnant. And so, whatever you need to do to, even in COVID, even in these challenging times, to feel that, get out there and do that. So, I want to encourage you guys to also check out Veronica's organization. I serve on the board. So a couple things that we'll make sure to do is include the website, but also a link to donate. If this is a cause that, number one, either you are directly impacted by or someone who's a caregiver, this organization is not just for education around dementia and Alzheimer's. It's specifically meant to be a caregiver support organization. Why does that matter? To really kind of hone in on that, because think about it this way. If someone is constantly pouring into someone else and they do not have any opportunities to take care of themselves, who else is going to champion on their behalf and be their advocate? If they're advocating, who's going to advocate for them? This organization does that. And so as Veronica's friend and watching her grow and watching her kind of lose that freedom, it's important that I found a way to support her in that way. But also, this is an opportunity for you. If you are experiencing or know someone who's a caregiver, definitely either point them in the direction of the focus groups or see if you can donate to the causes that she has going on. It's 2020 right now. It's going to be 2021 very soon. And so she has a full list of events that'll be coming out. Definitely get your eyes on it and see if you can contribute and support. A lot of fun stuff too, like music center, since we're going virtual, lots of virtual parties. So just get in, tap in, as they say on Clubhouse, right? Tap in.
Reach out to me directly. Yeah. Social media, Care Warriors on Facebook and on Instagram. I will respond to anyone who reaches out. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Y'all can check out Woke Creative. I'll make sure to put a link in here too. It's so weird to even talk about it because we've been doing it for a year. We haven't really talked about it with anyone. We had one conversation on Myra's podcast about So yeah, we'll put in Woke Creative. Again, we're kind of batch style, small batch style. But if you're definitely kind of if you're looking for someone who's going to take time with you and not rush your process, that's us, because we're not in any rush and we don't want you to feel rushed either. And that's the kind of service we want to give. So, all right, that's enough shameless plugging. B, when you get a second, if at all you think of a book, a song, any of that comes to mind, I'll definitely make sure to include it for people too, because that is a big part of what I love.
Yeah, I know. It's going to come to me and I'm going to be like, that's what I should do.
Awesome. All right. Thank you guys so much. We will be returning with 2000. I think we're moving into 2013 next. And so I have a really special guest I'm looking forward to bringing on. But in the meantime, check out Dementia Care Warriors and make sure, if you have not looked at Creative Flow Alchemy Academy, where we do this and so much more, check us out. Peace.